Good afternoon. I'm Christine,
I'm Saba.
and we're graduate students at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, and we want to thank you for joining our discussion on autism. Today, we're going to describe what autism looks like, how to communicate with with the school-age student that is either verbal or is nonverbal. We're going to also share a few statistics about the prevalence in the U.S. And we'll discuss how a student's language skills are assessed in a school-based setting. We'll talk about how to communicate with that child who is verbal or nonverbal. And lastly, we'll share a few resources that may be beneficial regardless if you're a parent or an educator.
What is autism? So, autism is a constellation of characteristics that may affect social interactions and communication and may include repetitive behaviors. The condition is lifelong and varies by individual.
Okay, and because autism is a spectrum disorder, the characteristics will look different in each child in a school-based setting. For a child to be identified as showing autistic tendencies, they would need to demonstrate two behaviors in the impairment in social communication and social interaction, and three behaviors in the restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So the DSM 5 outlines the behaviors in impairment in social communication and social interaction as deficits in nonverbal communication, deficits in developing relationships beyond caregivers, deficits in social or emotional reciprocity. And then in the category labeled as restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, we have stereotyped repetitive speech or movements, excessive adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of behavior, abnormally high fixated interests, and unusual sensory input or response to sensory interest.
If someone says that autism runs in the family, if more than one person in the family has the condition, this may be caused by gene mutations. So it could be passed down from either the mother or the father. Or it could be caused by environmental factors such as dietary habits or a combination of genetic and environmental factors may also be responsible for this disorder. To determine if the condition is genetic in nature, a genetics professional would need to collect family history and determine if there truly is a genetic component.
So, who's most likely to be diagnosed with autism? And and then I'm also wondering, why are boys receiving an autism diagnosis disorder more so than girls? Could it be a true bias? Well, there have been several studies that suggest that girls receive an autism diagnosis later in life than boys. This just indicates that the condition is harder to spot in girls than in boys. When researchers have followed a group of boys and girls from infancy into adulthood, they support the prevalence of a 3.25 to 1 ratio. So if we look for a further explanation, we can look into biology. And according to Zeldant's research, the brains of people with autism show patterns of gene expression that are more evident in males than in females and are specific to the microglia. She suggests that girls are somehow shielded from the autism condition. Girls tend to have more gene mutations than boys. And she goes on to say that with autism, they seem to inherit their mutations from unaffected mothers more often than from unaffected fathers. So the reason that boys receive an autism spectrum diagnosis can be linked to biology. Now let's change subjects and discuss how a child may be educationally impacted. Some children with autism will not be able to verbally communicate and may require an augmentative and alternative communication device, more broadly known as AAC. We'll briefly discuss AAC before the end of this presentation, and we'll provide a few resources, and those will be included in the resource section located at the end of the presentation.
What are the educational rights for a child with autism? According to the 2004 revision for IDEA, all children with a disability, including children with autism, are entitled to early intervention as well as special education services. Parents are also to be treated as an equal partner when determining the goals for their child. A little later in the presentation, we will discuss how their child is assessed in a school-based setting and how the parents are involved.
Okay, so next we'll discuss the referral process. It consists of any concerns, usually by the parent and the classroom teacher. Once the concerns are expressed, and then a meeting with administration is carried out to initiate the referral process and assign consent for testing to take place. If referral was initiated by the parent, then the parent has 15 days to sign the consent form. Once the consent for full and individual evaluation is signed, assessment staff has 30 school days to test and complete the full individual evaluation, or the FIE. And that's also to include writing the report. Then from the date of the report, assessment staff has 45 calendar days to hold the ARD meeting.
Within the school setting, assessment staff consisting of a school psychologist, speech language pathologist, and occupational therapist come together as a team to assess students that appear to be on the spectrum. Each assessment professional is in charge of their own area of expertise. The school psychologist administers assessments that looks at the behavior component. The speech language pathologist assesses social language and pragmatics, and the occupational therapist assesses the sensory component.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about how language is assessed in the school for a student with autism. And there are 3 assessments that you can use to determine if the student does have autism and what their level of language impairment may or may not be. The first test that we're going to discuss is the Childhood Autism Rating Scale, or the CARS. And it's designed as a clinical rating scale for the trained clinician to rate items indicative of autism spectrum disorder after direct observation of the child. And the CARS 2 is preferred over the older original CARS. The form is used with individuals of all ages and in both clinical and research settings. So after the ARD team gets together and they do their direct observation, indirect observation, conduct teacher interviews and parent interviews, they're going to get together to collaborate and score this, the CARS. It's a 17-point rating scale, and it will determine if the student does show autistic behaviors, and if so, what the severity is. Another assessment that we can use to assess receptive and expressive language is the SELF. However, the SELF also assesses social language skills and has a pragmatic profile included in the assessment. The assessment is scored by using standard scores, percentile ranks, and growth percentile scale for the pragmatic profile. A third assessment that can be used in a school setting is the CASEL 2, the Comprehension Assessment of Spoken Language Second Edition. And this measures social and pragmatic language that is appropriate across different situational contexts and ability to modify language according to social situations.
If a child is nonverbal, there are various forms of communication aside from speaking that can be utilized. You may see a child who is crying, reaching, using gestures, or using pictures to communicate. Sometimes, when a child exhibits negative behaviors, they may be trying to communicate a want or a dislike. If you are noticing some of these behaviors, perhaps an AAC device could be introduced as a means to support expressive communication. Your school's SLP will work with their technology department to ensure a device that meets the needs of the child.
You may also see echolalia in a student with autism. The student may repeat what you're saying.
They may also repeat previous answers that they've used before. This is a good time for the teacher or therapist to prompt the child by saying, "Are those your words or my words?" to really have the child think about their responses.
And since these children take things quite literally, you should really avoid sarcasm or jargon. Call the child by name and get their attention before initiating a conversation. And as I said earlier, your school's SLP will coordinate the AAC setup. There's a vast array of devices to choose from. Some devices can speak one word at a time, or they can speak in full phrases and sentences. There are devices that are triggered by an eye gaze or by selecting a switch. The left picture depicts a student work area that is controlled and structured to help the students attend to and complete functional and academic tasks. The middle picture is when it's time to transition to lunch or PE, the student can place their picture or name on the correct transitional visual. And then the picture on the right would be used at the initial start of the morning, where students start off at circle time to go over morning routines. When students arrive to the classroom, they place the picture or name on the circle time visual. On this page, you're going to see an interview between Brandon and an occupational therapist, Denise, where she talks about the benefits of that the student will receive from entering the sensory room. And this set of 3 pictures depicts what a typical sensory room might look like in a school setting.
Great. So, what are the strategies that you use for sensory modulation?
Well, we have a lot of different strategies that we can use, but the main strategy that I use here at our school is this sensory room. Our students with autism have access to this sensory room on a daily basis, and it provides activities for kiddos who have hyposensitivities and hypersensitivities. And it's very interesting and amazing how the same activity can help to regulate a student who is hypo-responsive or hyper-responsive. For example, we have a ball pit over here, and we use this activity for both types of students. For example, if we have a student who is very hyperactive and needs to work out a lot of that energy, we'll use this ball pit for them to come and do different types of pretend play activities, such as swimming, running, moving from the green side to moving from the blue side to the blue side, moving from red side to red side. And that really helps our kiddos that are hyperactive work out some of that energy, and it helps to modulate their sensory system. And at the same time, it works for some of our kids that are hypo-responsive because it gives them an opportunity to do heavy work type of activities to help their level of arousal. And so it's very interesting to see how one activity can have the same kind of outcome for a different type of a need that the student has. There are other simple strategies that we use in the classroom, such as weighted vest. We use lap weights. We have quiet areas. But this is a really nice room that the students have access to, that they can come to on a daily basis. And typically, the way this room runs is on a schedule. It looks like a big playground, but it's very much run on a schedule, and the way the kids move from activity to activity is controlled, and it's typically on a timer. It all depends on the needs of the students. Some students have more flexibility, and they're allowed to do more choosing of what activity they want to go to. Some of our students who require an extreme amount of structure usually use the picture exchange communication in here, and that's when it's very nice to work with a speech therapist, because they help teach us OTs how to facilitate that communication with our students when they're here in this room.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise. Have a good day.
You too.
This is Denise, our occupational therapist in the school setting.
Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Denise. I just wanted to interview you to see what your main role as an occupational therapist and how you support us speech-language pathologists.
My main role as an occupational therapist in the school setting, helping our children with autism and working with speech therapists, is to mainly provide strategies for sensory modulation for our kids. A lot of our kids with autism have a very hard time maintaining attention and focusing and being able to tolerate tasks in the classroom. So I provide strategies to our classroom teachers and also to our speech therapist to give the kids ways to help them be more calm and more involved and engaged during their daily tasks at school.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise.
I will be demonstrating the use of a social story for a child who has a nose-picking habit, just to fulfill that sensory need. I would read them a story upon arrival, and this story would go, "I have a nose. Sometimes I like to pick my nose, but picking my nose is gross. It makes other people feel uncomfortable. When I pick my nose, I get germs on my hands. Those germs get on my friends when we play, and that's not safe. So instead of picking my nose, I can ask for a chew toy, or ask for a tissue, so my friends and I can stay clean and safe." Another type of visual support that can be used in the classroom is the use of a picture schedule. A picture schedule allows the child to see what is upcoming in their day, and they are able to visualize what's coming next. We would start by showing them a warm-up card. Then we would go to circle time. Following circle, we would go to the gym. Next, we would take a bathroom break. Following the restroom, we have snack. After snack, the child attends centers. After centers, the child can collect their shoes before it's time to go home. The use of a visual schedule can help the child remain on track and also have no unexpected surprises in their day that challenges them or throws them off their routines. Children who are placed on a gluten-free diet have shown increased language and improvement in social communication. Contemporary attitudes towards this specific treatment are as follows. Parents shared their findings of improvement in child language, hyperactivity, and minimal tantrums. As a result of decreased autistic tendencies, there has been a direct effect on the child's ability to learn. The byproducts of gluten and casein disrupts brain function by altering opioid activity, which is involved in pain regulation and social bonding.
There are a number of excellent organizations that can help support classroom instruction for students with autism spectrum disorder. The information presented in this module is intended as just a very brief description of ASD and its impact on learning. Much more in-depth information and instructional strategies can be assessed through the Autism Society of America.
Autism Speaks is a national organization established in 2005 dedicated to funding global biomedical research into the causes, prevention, treatments, and cure for autism, to raising public awareness about autism and its effects on individuals, families, and society, and to bring hope to all who deal with the hardships of this disorder.
Ladders, a national organization established in 1981 with a mission to provide the highest quality clinical, social, and support services to those diagnosed with autism, pervasive developmental disorders, and other developmental disabilities.
Families for Early Autism Treatment is a national nonprofit organization established in 1993 dedicated to providing best outcome education, advocacy, and support for individuals with autism.
Founded in 2007, the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorder focuses its work on collaboration among 3 universities to include the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and the Mind Institute, University of California, Davis, with the goal of promoting the use of evidence-based practices for children and youth with ASD, birth to 22 years of age.
The following modules include resources for state-level services.